All right, let's call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome all. Happy to be taking over this role. I will probably make a lot of rookie mistakes, so please bear with me. Like not having posted the agenda to the website, I will make sure that that gets done the next time. I did send an email out welcoming Ron Tupper to our group. I think Ron has already met everyone.
I didn't actually introduce myself. I'm Mike Yeager.
So thank you, Mike. We've met before when you were on council. But yes.
And I met Ron in church.
He did. Yep.
You know, he's a good guy.
Gosh, thanks.
Ron has a terrific background in strategic consulting, so we can count on him for some great ideas. I know that he's opinionated. I love that about him. I love the fact that all of us are opinionated and bring those opinions forward. And I absolutely want to make sure that we all understand that that's what makes Mtrac great. It's not that we all think one way and agree on everything. We should disagree, obviously respectfully, healthily, but please continue to bring your points of view forward. So let's moving on to something that I'm actually adding to the official agenda. I know that other committees and commissions do this. I think it's a good idea for Maureen to give us the current lay of the land with respect to Mtrac and what may be going on at the city council level that we should be aware of. Maureen?
Certainly. Thank you, Marty. So one of the topics that this group has obviously invested a lot of time in the past and was instrumental in us moving forward with changes both to the mercantile fees as well as to the purchasing of the new software. So I just wanted to give a brief update. This is the first year that the mercantile fee process went electronic, meaning applications were sent out electronically. Yeah, obviously, you know, Erin and her team did a great job at transitioning to that. Had some hiccups, but I think for the most part, it was very successful. To date, and these numbers, these are just high-level numbers, they've issued probably about 1,200 licenses. They do have some that they need to follow up on. There's oftentimes a piece of documentation that might be missing, whether it's the insurance certification or, you know, they need to make sure that the taxes are up to date or water, sewer, et cetera. And then there are others that didn't renew, so they will follow up with those. And then anything that sort of falls out of that process would then be turned over to code enforcement. For follow-up directly with the property owner or the business owner. So at this point, they've been moving through that. They have not started to do the comparative QA analysis in Deckert yet because they really were trying to get everything in and make sure that they weren't, you know, approaching property or business owners without having everything reconciled. So I expect that they'll work through the majority of that through this month. And perhaps in July, they'll have a better sense of any of the outliers that did not file for a mercantile license. So look forward to getting a report from her probably in July sometime and being able to share that at the August meeting. That would be my goal. You have two other topics on the agenda, so if you don't mind, I did some follow-up on those in advance, Marty. So one is the beach operations, and this is just a very high level, just to orient this group to beach operations for this year. Currently, there are 5 hotels and 8 regular, which are the beach services through Steigers. The yearly income is about $213,000. I did confirm that in the fall, they will be working on the renewals for the contracts to go into effect for starting in 2026.
I'm sorry. What do you mean by beach operation. So these hotels are paying,
Yeah, so they're, the city for the use of space, it's not dedicated, it is still open to the public, but they're permitted to set up umbrellas or perhaps cabanas and chairs, either, for the most part, for their own guests, but sometimes even other people from the public at certain of the properties can pay to access those areas. This group has looked at that in the past. It's probably a good time, and I know, Marty, you have just
Yeah, so there will be a
slide
bit
deck.
more discussion on
Yeah,
that later.
yeah.
Maureen may or may not still be here for that, so
Yeah.
I do appreciate you sharing this
Yeah.
information now.
There was a meeting I know that there's also been discussions in the past about the code enforcement and making sure that the concessions are adhering to the guidelines, which are very detailed in their contracts, because I've seen them. The operations manager who oversees this effort now, Michelle Sampson, went out and met with Paul, with all of the key contacts for these concessions, and then, sorry, the Cape May Police was there, as well as code enforcement, to talk about exactly when they're permitted to set up and what the scope of their operations are. And she's going out routinely to sort of check on that. And she also is getting feedback from beach tag operations since they're sort of on the scene. So just wanted to share that with the group. And then, Marty, I did have some very preliminary numbers on beach tag sales for this season as compared for the preseason information, if you want me to just share that briefly.
Sure.
And so preseason revenue from 2024 was about $836,000 as compared to preseason revenue for 25, which is $883. So the difference was approximately $47,000. Commercial beach tags, we've seen a slight increase, which is good compared to, so 24, it was about 390,000 for preseason commercial, and preseason commercial for 2025 was 426 and some change. So seeing an increase in adoption and people getting those as appropriate, so I think that's a good upward trend, and that would be my report to the committee. Okay.
There weren't any rate increases associated, right?
No.
So, Maureen, I thought that I heard the city council that tag sales were down.
The dailies and the weeklies probably are because of weather.
Dailies and weeklies, not the preseason.
Not the preseason, yes, that's correct. Yeah, and I think that they saw a decline around Memorial Day, and some of the weather has affected those, yeah.
Okay, the next item is, I did send along the two resolutions that both formed this committee and then further defined the roles of different members of the committee, including the council liaison, the chairperson, and the secretary. I was just asked by Aaron to appoint one, but I'm going to handle that for the time being, and the next meeting we'll probably appoint a secretary. We have not been publishing minutes. I actually technically am not yet chairperson because there were no minutes that told the city that I was chairperson. So I will have to go back and watch the broadcast, take some notes, and submit some minutes.
So you still have the opportunity to resign.
Well, I always have that opportunity, but you have the opportunity to not listen.
I was going to say, and then there's the opportunity for someone else to be
I can
named
step
chair.
aside, but it'll be a quiet meeting. In the resolution that formed us in 2020, on the first page, under 3, it says, "The committee's duties shall include conduct a comprehensive analysis of the city's current budgeting practices and of the community it serves, and then consult with any and all sources of expertise, identify models of revenue sources and resource allocation." I think that we've informally described Mtrac as being, our role being to provide the city with ideas to generate revenue without generating additional taxation. And, but I think that when you read the definition, many times we can't really look at things purely from a revenue perspective. It has to overlap into expenses. Okay? So I think that we will see a bit more focus going forward, because I think we've probably already identified all the low-hanging fruit from a revenue perspective, that we may be able to come up with ways to help from the expense side. I know that Maureen does a great job of scrubbing the budget already anyway, but that puts her in a great position to be able to carry back some of our ideas. So I think as we start to prioritize 2025-26 projects, I think that we can start to think not just about revenue, but also about net revenue, meaning if we can reduce expenses, that in turn increases revenue.
I fully agree.
Okay? Any discussion about what our role is or the resolutions themselves? So moving to the very long list of 2025 issues that Dennis put together, and I think that I knew when he did this was to give us his parting thoughts about what we should be working on, and I appreciate his doing that. I asked each of you to think about whether there is a particular issue or issues that is in the forefront of your minds that we can consider working on, but recognizing we cannot do all of this year. So any specific thoughts?
You mean as to what to exclude or to focus on, or both?
Focus on, yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking, I think that 3 or 4 or 5 projects is probably a reasonable number, and I'm interested to hear what others are anxious to work on.
So I guess maybe I'll start with a question. As I think about, I mean, this is a great list of things, I understand that, but as I think about the sources of revenue that we're talking about, it's either people who live here, so residents, taxpayers who may not live here, there's businesses, there's grants. The thing that I'm curious as to whether has been considered has been alternative, I'll use sponsorships, for example. Have we ever solicited companies to sponsor events or buildings or trails or, kinds of other more voluntary levels of revenue, as opposed to it being a tax or a fee or something on one of these constituents? I'm just wondering whether we've ever considered more voluntary means to raise money for various things that our city has to offer without obviously commercializing the whole,
Sure.
the whole city.
So my first sort of reaction to that is I don't think that as a municipal government we're permitted to accept sponsorships because of the influence. But I will certainly run that past Chris Gillenschwartz. But that would be my first sort of response to say, it would infer, in my opinion only, not legal definition, that we would have some kind of allegiance, or that we would be considered to be potentially biased or prejudiced to a particular business or company that might provide that type of, in lieu of, kind of scenario.
I guess I think of in many parts of the country, there are Adopt a Highway is sponsored by, this company or that company.
Fireworks are paid by
Fireworks
sponsors.
are sponsored by
in other,
somebody.
in other cities.
And some of those
States
arrangements
Arena
do
or
exist.
whatever, yeah.
But if you were thinking about someone who was going to be a large donor, partially city, but not really related, is the AME Church, with the donation by Chris Clemens on behalf of her husband. So that is a city property, but it was specifically done to the Eastland Theater. Other things that you could look at that might be along those lines is if someone wanted to have naming rights, I don't know, I'll throw this out there as an example, only to something like the community center. So if a family foundation really wanted to promote health and welfare, or a third-party insurance carrier, those are the kinds of things that wouldn't directly influence our business operations or our, but so I think it would be a bit of a fine line to sort of cull that out and figure out whether or not it's even permitted under municipal government.
It's a good idea. It's worth continuing to think about. So, for example, using the community center, we could have someone donate Pelotons, and I think that probably would be okay. So I think that there are possibilities, but commercialization of the buildings and the streets, for example, I'm not quite sure that we could go we could go there. So Emily Dempsey's street out here now is in recognition of the role that she played in the community in the past. Bob Elwell will have a street named after him at some point in time.
I don't think so.
With his
But, you know, Ron, what I was thinking is, we have so many organizations, you know, we have MAC, we have Kiwanis, we have, I don't even know off the top of my head how many we have, but they're always out there trying to make money, to raise funds for whatever they do for the community. I mean, on Kiwanis, and I know we raise money for scholarships for the kids. That's a sort of a, you know, thing that we do, and, you know, Mac's always doing something.
Right, in Kiwanis Park,
So,
I mean, was
I don't know
largely
if that's, if
result.
there's even enough room or days in the year for somebody else to come in.
Right.
It seems to me there's always something going on, you know, the music festival, I mean, it's just,
Well, I saw that there's a
I'm
swim.
not against your idea, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure how
There's a
could we
swim
fit it?
coming up, an ocean swim and it said it was to benefit the Lifeguard Association. I'm like, what the heck is the Lifeguard Association?
Oh, it's a union.
They provide scholarships to
It's a
the
union.
lifeguards that are pursuing higher education. So that's going to wind up being sponsored, or they're looking for sponsors. So,
Mike Gordon
Ron, I
got
think it's
some of
a
that money
good,
one time.
I think it's a good idea of an area that we could look into. Potentially, for example, the new nature trail, we could adopt a highway, adopt a nature trail where they're helping to keep.
Keep it preserved.
Once we decide who's allowed to use it.
I mean, I lived in Milwaukee, and the city of Milwaukee allowed the 3 breweries in town to sponsor a music festival.
Yep.
As an example. They did all that. I don't think we want to change the name of the city to Cape Musk yet.
Not yet. He may buy the city. You better watch out.
Any other thoughts on agenda items, on priorities?
Yeah, you know, and maybe there's nothing we can do about it, Martin, but I continue, and I know we've talked about this before. The city of Cape May obviously has done a terrific job, and, you know, with help from organizations like ours and the council, to keep taxes flat for how many years now? 5, 6, whatever it is. But our tax bill keeps going up. And so as
Not ours, the school and the.
our tax bill, meaning as taxpayers, our tax bills continue to go up because of the schools and
Yeah.
because of the county. And so, you know, as responsible to taxpayers, it just seems to me that is there anything that we could influence as it relates to those 2 aspects of our tax bill that do continue? I mean, it's going to go up again this year. We know it will, right? Because the funding of schools are going down, and right? And the county assesses in a different fashion.
Right. So that is one of the ones that's listed, and
Yeah.
the school, the regional school is not, but it's in the same boat. One or the other one. I think the county went down this year. So, yeah,
I don't think it necessarily means our bill's going to go down because the assessments will.
correct. So the school assessment went up, ours was flat, county was down. So depending on your mix, I do think I think I've heard that some bills are actually down this year.
Are they?
Yeah.
I'd heard the opposite, that the assessments are continuing to
Yep.
go up. They're still looking at the fact that our houses are worth more.
Well, that's, right. Okay, other thoughts?
This is something random. This is just from the Environmental Commission. Columbia University delivered a capstone project on the desalination plant. And one of the ideas, the report is online, was to basically have companies extract the salt and to use for their business purposes. But I noticed it didn't say anything about like revenue sharing or something like that. So I don't know if the city could get a portion of the revenue that is taken from the companies for their business purposes.
Can I haven't had time to review that report,
Sure.
but can I just as a point of curiosity,
Yeah.
what businesses would use the salt?
There were 3 different ones. One company, they sell lithium batteries.
Okay,
The other company was a salt company where they actually use it, it seems like for snow.
interesting.
There was one other company too, but
Okay,
I
all right.
can't remember.
Well, I would think if we went into some type of arrangement that obviously,
part of it.
yeah, it would be part of the discussion. I mean, generally, that's, you know, when I've looked at the other shared services kind of agreements, yeah.
It's in
so.
there.
Okay, we can take a look at that. Obviously, what we read on Cape May Live and other Facebook groups is not always accurate. Someone was saying
Right.
that desal creates toxic waste. So I'm not quite sure what the whether that's true or not, but I'll look into it a little bit more and see what I can find out.
Great.
Yep,
Yeah.
My turn?
Your turn.
sure.
Well, for me, one thing I'm going to say is what you shouldn't do is pay attention to number one, because I think that the bonding schedule and the surplus policy, it's a very important financial management process. It's being done right. I know people get nervous about the surplus. I can tell you, if that surplus wasn't there, I would be nervous, because I know what's coming down the pike. That surplus is going to be necessary. So I think, even though people don't like to see that, all that money sitting there, it's important that it is. But the next thing that bugs me are the fees in this city. And, we just went through this, and we knew that most of the fees that the businesses are paying have been flat for 20 years. And I think that perhaps we've put some wording in the resolutions, not the resolutions, but the ordinances that were amended. But they were there before, and I'm not confident that they're going to be followed. How do we, what can we do to make sure they're followed, or can we be the ones to agree to suggest the fee schedules each year when it's time? And I think they should be changing every year. Or
Well, I think because some of the lags and everything, Mike, to be able to do it every year, like just for example, the mercantile fee process, really, the season is now, right? They
Right.
didn't go out until April, so you really wouldn't have the full data till sometime in January. And then you've got to make decisions to change it at that point in time to get, it took a while to even for us to get together with the city, with the clerk's office, no disparagement to her, but it's a pretty detailed process. What I had said when I met with that group, with the city manager, is we have to commit to every 2 years, every 24 months at a minimum. It doesn't mean it'll change because of the cost of living or the expense to do it, but we have to commit to do the analysis. So I've made it clear as part of the city manager and the city's clerk's responsibility, and would certainly think that we should put a tickler on the calendar that says, in the summer of 2026, this committee should be asking that be looked at, in the fall for consideration for changes going into 27. I mean, that's, kind of the timeline that you would want to do it.
It did go up, though, right?
Oh, they did. Oh, yes, they
Yes.
did.
we
We
just
went through,
implemented
we went through and sat, and it was, I will tell you, I was personally sitting at the table going through every fee with them. So those have been adjusted. I think you need at least a full cycle to go through. So I would recommend a calendar tickler for the summer of 2026, which gives them plenty of time to do an analysis and make recommendations before the budget season for 27.
so this committee then really won't be playing any role in
Not in
those
that
fees.
particular area for now. I think that we're going to take a look at the revenue once we get through the mercantile season and everything is sort of known, what should be out there. We could probably expect a report maybe at the October meeting. I don't want to,
But we did play a role previously.
we did, we pushed for it, yeah.
Michael, I mean,
And-
right? I mean,
right.
we did.
Yes.
Right.
We're the ones that sort of,
Right,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And and some of the other changes from the square footage for the rentals
Yeah.
to the bedrooms will be seen because, and I do want to mention, because I sat and went through this process with the clerk's office, there's two systems. So you have the SDL system, which they use in the clerk's office for the application data fields, and then there's the system for the payments. So they had to touch both systems, which is, when you're making these changes, it's just not one. You've got to update both systems at the same time to reconcile.
So we
So,
do,
I mean,
we do have a role in that, and we do remind the city we have already recommended that they all the fees be updated biennially. When we don't see that happening, then it's our role to go back and say, hey, we've committed to this, you guys need to execute.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying too is that there's a lot of resources here, and maybe, they should rely on us. If nothing else, I think that maybe we should be looking at the schedules they're proposing, and if we have,
Generally, they do. For example, on the development fees, they did ask for our opinions. They did the year before that for the beach tag fees. They did bring it to us. Admittedly, we didn't get the fees in advance, so we couldn't study it in context, but I've sort of taken on the role of making sure that we're keeping track of that. I want to go back to your other issue about the bonding schedule, and I know why it's here. I think we all know why it's here. I did actually have a conversation about the fact that if from a revenue perspective and an expense perspective, if our income on our investments exceeds the rate that we pay on bonds,
That's a different story.
which it does, bonding is a good thing.
absolutely.
Okay. Now, the point that is raised elsewhere about 25 years from now is a very valid one.
Yes.
And we don't want our children or our children's children to be bearing the brunt of the decisions that are made today. But especially the short-term bonding is actually a positive thing for the city. With respect to the surplus policy, Mtrac did put a proposal forward in the fall where we can't set the policy, but we've asked that the city should consider having a formal policy with respect to the size of the surplus. Not that we shouldn't have one, but we should have a point of view, the city should have a point of view on when is enough enough.
Right, and when we're looking at a $40 to $45 million desal plant, and we have no idea.
Whether
we're
there's going to
told
be any funding.
We're getting the fund, we're told we're getting the funding,
Right.
but if we don't,
Especially in this
don't
day and
talk
age.
to me about the surplus is too big, because it'll be gone.
And we do have, I mean, there's an external professional who guides the conversation for the city and sort of tells, us really how the schedule should look, what debt service is on there, what is off. So Leon Costello has been doing this for, 25-plus years and understands the city finances intimately. So I think that's sort of, the guidepost.
Does he understand the political risks associated with what's going on right now?
He certainly does.
At the same time, one of the reasons I brought up the review of expenses as well as revenue is that the city's hands are tied to a certain extent by state law. There's only a certain amount of revenue generation that's allowed year over year, and only a certain amount of expense expansion that's allowed to protect the public. I think Mtrac should play a role in looking at those calculations and understanding better what is included and what's not included. Are there ways that the utilities, for example, can be used to help the city to not be as constricted? That's what many towns and cities do. I think that we can, working with Leon, working with Kevin, I think we can understand better what elements of expense and what elements of revenue count and don't count towards certain calculations and make recommendations out of that. So that's one of the items that I'd like to see us working on the second half of this year and into '26.
So
can
for
I-
this year's, I'm sorry.
I just had one other question, is the revaluation. Where are we?
They're just doing the digital map right now, so we have not gotten word from the county where we fit or where we sit. And until we get that, there's sort of no rush for us to sign up for what could be somewhere between a $250,000 and $400,000 bill. So there's not been, I don't think that the county has executed, that anyone is sort of on the list right now. So I don't think anyone's raising their hand or their head on that one. But I do want to go back, Marty, just to mention something, what happened in the '25 budget. We took a closer look at the appropriations for general administrative, what have been primarily in the general administrative expense bucket. And 90% of the city's budget is operational. That's the first point of position. And so what we did was what Kevin and Paul did was take a look at what really could be allocated to the utilities so that it was not in the general administrative budget, which, as Marty just explained, is under a cap, okay? So we started with that and realigned some expenses. I'll give you an example. So, things that the Public Works might do that is beach-related got reassigned from a cost perspective, some of it where it could, individual salaries or portions of salary, because they support beach operations. What I've done with working with Kevin and Justin and Paul most recently is set up an FTE allocation model. I'm used to this in healthcare where you really apportion personnel's time, very exacting, to different buckets so that you can understand really where it should be rather than just making some high-level guesses, more detailed guesses. I saw the first model of that. I have to follow up with Kevin and Justin. They've actually set up the spreadsheet so that every department head on a biweekly basis when they do payroll, who have any department that does services amongst or out to the utilities, must allocate hours. And so we will have a much better baseline for '26 to exactly do some of these things where we're apportioning time and effort into a utility where they're actually supporting that effort. So getting a little bit more sophisticated rather than just, taking a high level and discussion with a department head, they're now required to do this on a payroll basis. So
So it sounds like we're not starting from zero.
No.
Obviously, we're not going to solve this today, but, in the interest of time, it's just something that the creativity that I've seen from this group in the past, I think if we put some energy into it, we may be able to come up with some ideas that maybe haven't occurred to the city so far. I did ask Job couldn't make it tonight. He had, unfortunately, had to go to court for something. He didn't share what it was, nor should he have. But his two are, he'd like to be looking more at recycling. And that is on the list of the trash and recycling services, where I think that there's some energy that we can put forward on that, and potentially, that doesn't mean that anything is going to change, but give us a better understanding about the costs of each and what the alternatives might be.
Well, I thought the city had committed anyway to look at this in the fall, correct?
That's the recycling?
Yeah.
But it was the recycling policy. I
But
think,
isn't the policy going to be
No.
impacted by the actual costs associated with it?
Yeah, so we currently do have an idea of what the cost is for the services that are being provided. That is known.
Historical, I'm talking about over the summer with the new
No,
policy.
we do know, we do know, because part of it was that was what was happening in the past. So there's two ways that people have looked at this. You could either say it's going to increase or it's going to decrease, quite frankly, and I don't want to take away.
yep.
Yeah. What I want to say is the city council has requested from the Department of Public Works, the director, a report in November. And they will come back to us with what has occurred and transpired, and they will also, because of this allocation methodology, will have a better understanding of how much time and energy and be able to compare that. Now,
That was the point I was trying to make.
yeah, maybe an apples to oranges a little bit, but it'll be close enough for us to be able to make some
I
assessment.
know what Dennis was referring to in putting it on the agenda was a little more holistic than the current policy, okay? The thought was that we should be looking at what the alternatives are that are available to the city, and potentially even combining them. So I think it's a little bit longer-term project, but something that Job mentioned as being, and I know that, Ron, you also have some interest in that area. And then, of course, Job would mention parking, and we are not responsible for coming up with a parking solution. We would be responsible for the funding for a parking solution. But if it may be worth our while to begin to try to drive that. There has been some discussion about parking solutions. And of course, every summer we just come up against this beachhead that we can't make any progress on. I personally would like to work on the payment in lieu of taxes. I think that that's a big hitter. I think it could take years for us to make progress on that. What that means is that the Coast Guard does not pay taxes. And so there's a program, a federal program that says that in lieu of taxes, we will make a payment to cover some of the expenses. And I think that that's an area that I know that Mtrac has maybe talked about in the past, but not done much on. But that could be a big hitter in my mind.
It's the only way we're ever going to get anything back from the county.
Right.
Well, the place across the street's the same way, isn't it? Don't they? Victorian Towers?
yeah,
They
right,
don't pay taxes.
right.
Right, but so who do we go after for that?
Well, I mean, I think we got to take a close look at it, though.
The federal government, notwithstanding whatever we read in the paper on a daily basis, okay, this is their program, and they have deep pockets. So if we can build a case, we have the possibility of being, it'll take years. But if we don't ever try to make progress on it, we won't make any progress.
Well, there's a new captain coming in, according to the clerk, so maybe that's the time to,
Well, that ties into what I was saying up earlier about the school taxes. I mean, so I'm with you 100% on that.
yeah.
Okay, so that's already a pretty healthy list. I'll continue to drive our meetings towards these topics, and obviously, anybody that wants to volunteer to step forward and help on some of the work is very much appreciated.
Martin, I don't know how much time you've allotted, but the one thing, I know Dennis came up with, I drove past the lumber yard the other day, and there's about 9 golf carts there. Do they pay a mercantile license to operate in Cape May?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Single business one.
Okay,
Yes. Sorry, I should have said, yes.
okay. I just wondered
But
whether, I know they had talked about it, but I
If you
didn't
remember,
know
we
whether it
had,
came
we had a
through.
couple of years ago proposed
Yeah.
that there be actually a sticker
Well, I
on
agree
the
with that
carts.
too,
right. So
because I
that can
think
be resurrected
Easier for the
potentially.
cops.
Let me just comment on that. We have spoken to the police chief about that, and he sees no value in doing that. So I just want to mention that
Yep.
before this committee. I've talked extensively to him. Dennis talked extensively. He did not see the value of doing that. He meets, and I participate every year since I started this program in talking to the businesses about the LSV guidelines. And for the last 2 years, we provide them with stickers that go on, would talk about the rules of the road kind of a thing. So we continue with that
We made some
effort.
progress there, I think. That we made progress.
And
The only, if I
Even though
could-
one person's opinion may be negative, that doesn't mean that we necessarily don't consider doing something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Martin, the only other thing, and I don't mean to add anything to the list, but more around, we've talked about before for many years about the fact that we're concerned that code enforcement
Yep.
doesn't have the resource to do what needs to be done, and that really, to your point before about net revenue, that maybe thinking about and making sure that we're monitoring what's taking place there so that we're getting the fees that we should be getting, and if that means that we ought to raise expense for code enforcement, maybe that's something we need to continue to monitor.
Duly noted. I do know that that's a prominent topic of discussion every time that there's anything going on in the city is how are we going to enforce it? So what role Mtrac can play in that, I'm not 100% sure, but I do think it's worth soliciting some additional opinions.
At least to have a report back to Mtrac about how effective
Yep.
they feel they have been in terms of actually monitoring and collecting the fees and et
Right.
cetera.
I think it's become a little bit better over the last year. Good.
I think
That's
it,
my
I think
opinion.
it
That's
has.
what I hear on the street,
Yep.
But I think that my recollection of one of the problems is that it's as difficult to hire a code enforcement person as it is a police officer.
Sure.
Which essentially they are. So you have a labor pool problem.
Yep.
Really.
Yep.
They've got to be qualified to do those jobs.
Just remind, the Deckard program will at least help us on some component of this. So that would be, a good way to sort of beta test and see, how effective things are from that.
Okay. Good discussion, thanks. Want to move from here to what's going on our beaches. So many of you are aware that I had done a relatively detailed analysis of the beach tag activity, beach tag function last year. I don't think that we ever presented the final numbers, so I wanted to start there. We did increase the prices by 26% on a weighted average basis. The season tag, for example, went up by 33%. Some of the other tags went up by smaller percentages. Taking that 26% increase and continued strong demand put us at $3.73 million in beach tag revenue last year. This is a very large line item for the city's budget. It is something that it warrants attention because of the impact that it has on the finances of the city. That puts us third highest in the state, which NewJersey.com published a list, which I found to be interesting. The only two that are ahead of us are Ocean City, and they're way ahead of us, and Belmar. I don't know how familiar all of you are with Belmar. I used to spend some time there as a youth. And then we're slightly ahead of Spring Lake, is in fourth place.
Per capita, any reference in terms of? Number of tourists. Number of, people, residents, taxpayers.
So,
Some of those towns are really small, like Spring
Well-
Lake, and
Trying to get.
they're really small.
we don't have very many residents either, right? So we have lots of homeowners, but not necessarily residents. It would be kind of, I'm not quite sure that it would be, would tell us an awful
It wasn't in NewJersey.com, let's put it that way.
No, it was not. Just the local community, Seal is at 1.8, Avalon at 1.6, Stone Harbor at 1.1, and Cape May Point at 280,000. We sold 185,000 tags in 2024. That's a 3% increase over the prior year, but we did have differences by type, which I've shown here. So preseason, last year we were up by almost 8%, and a big driver of that was we moved the date from March to April.
Yeah.
So more people bought their tags because they had the period of time that they could buy them was longer. That led to a decrease in season tags because the year before, those April purchases would have been in the season tag category. We did see a robust increase in commercial tags last year. For those that may not be aware, a short-term rental is supposed to be providing season tags, not private seasonal tags. And so more commercial tags were purchased. I think there's still more that we can do there to publicize that, because I just don't think that a lot of short-term rental people that have business properties think of themselves as being a commercial enterprise. They still see it as being their house. And Maureen already reported that it's up again this year a little bit, not quite as much. Weekly tags actually went down last year by almost 4%. And then three-day tags dropped significantly, almost 19%. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. Daily tags, and you may recall that in the preseason or the early season last year, daily tags were up, I think it was 40%. And we had some discussion about it at the time. It leveled off, but it still wound up being up 11%. Now, when you sell 100,000 tags, a 10% increase is 10,000 daily tags. That's 3,000 to 5,000 cars that are entering the city this year that didn't enter the city as often last year. They may have come in for longer stays. They may be staying off island because of reaction to the prices here. We don't know the cause of that, but when you see an increase like that, in my mind, it causes me to think: is there a change in buying behavior that we should be aware of? And we'll continue to follow that.
Have we done any correlation between the number of commercial tags and the Merck licenses? Because I look at that and say, I personally, my wife and I, that would say that we buy 1% of the commercial tags that were sold, which is difficult for me to imagine.
So we actually, this is something within Deckert, we're going to be asking them to sort of do a search analysis. I've already seen houses listed on Verbo that are indicating that they offer seasonal beach tags as part of the rental. Some specifically state that it's a commercial tag. They actually state that. So we're actually going to be looking with Deckert to see whether or not they can do sort of a search query on those words within the advertisements, because they have, for a property, they list any platform that a rental property posts to.
So for your benefit, this is a service that we've.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the service. I'm just trying to think about how we correlate, again.
Sure.
personally speaking, I've never advertised that I have commercial tags. I just,
Yeah.
Right.
in fact, I don't even advertise that I have
Well,
tags at
and-
all, but
and
I provide commercial tags.
Congress, or Cape Resorts probably is a good chunk of the rest of it, okay?
It's mind-boggling to me.
Interesting, I think we charge 125 for the
Yes.
commercial tag.
Yes.
If you lose one, Cape Resorts charges you 200. So they actually make money off of.
They're gonna make a few
I could learn
bucks.
something there because I only charge 125. Yep. Yeah.
Ron, it is an area that as I continue to look at the beach tags and the beach operations, it's first and foremost in my mind, I'd like to see us actually split out on the listing, where you'd have hotels, motels in one category, B&Bs in a second, and then private homeowners in a third, to really let people know, you're supposed to be buying these tags.
Well, or if we even, as part of the Merck license process, so.
Yeah,
and again, as an owner,
you're not-
I buy
you're not
Merck
required
licenses and
to.
I buy.
Many homeowners.
I understand.
Yep.
But if you incorporate it as part of it, it may be
Okay.
more than a strong suggestion, that's all. Yep.
Going on to the annual review, this is something that Dennis started and that I've picked up, so we do, and I did send it to you in advance. The NewJersey.com lists annually all the tag prices for the entire state. It's 48 towns total, 8 don't charge, so there's 40 towns that charge. Mostly accurate. In some cases, when I do year by year and I see that the price went down, I say, well, that can't be, because that doesn't happen. So let me go to the municipality's website and take a look. In other cases, I may have the senior price from a year prior, no senior price listed this year, and I'll go back and look at the website. It's a good indication for where we stand relative to the state, but also relative to local communities in Cape May County. And then it has served in the past to help the city to understand where we should directionally be headed. So it's a relatively valuable operation, and it's not super time-consuming. I happen to enjoy it, so I guess I don't mind doing the work. On page 5, I've been gathering a lot of sentiment with respect to beaches, not really Cape May beaches, but beaches in general. And of course, it tends to get focused on Cape May because that's where we live. I spoke with one gentleman that, who I respect tremendously. It wasn't just some, offhand remark, said that we should not be charging for beaches. Beaches should be free, okay? And I explained to him that there's a state law that says that whatever revenue any town generates has to be used to offset the expenses that are being generated. You cannot continuously, endlessly charge beach tag prices that are in excess of how much it costs you to maintain the beaches. Now, we have a beach utility, and that fully funds our operation. And in fact, because of how much COVID has impacted people coming to Cape May, that beach utility currently has a relatively good surplus. The interesting thing is Stone Harbor, which has tremendous budgeting issues, that they're up against the cap and nowhere to go with it, actually said, hey, can't we have a utility like Cape May that pays for the beach operations? And their auditor told them, you could, but it's not going to solve your problem, because Cape May is one of the very few communities in the state that actually can fully fund their beach operations from beach tag sales. So today, taxpayers that choose to not use the beach don't pay anything towards the maintenance and operations of our beaches. 18 municipalities increased at least one form of their fee this year. We had 12 towns did last year, and 5 that have increased them 2 years in a row. So I'll continue to monitor that. Obviously, prices are continuing to increase. Inflation is more present now than it was a couple of years ago. And therefore, towns are looking at these and looking at the cost of running their beaches and have been raising their prices. Cape May Point actually is now ahead of us with respect to their seasonal tag. They've gone from $40 to $50.
Oh, they want to keep the riffraff out, that's all.
Where do you go to the beach, Bob? Just kidding. When you take a look at all of the towns in New Jersey, the New Jersey average is 72.50. Now, ours is 40, so that's a pretty big difference. There is a marked distinction between Monmouth and Ocean counties and Atlantic and Cape May counties.
Yeah, I was going to say, South Jersey has always been less.
So as more towns in Monmouth and Ocean County raise theirs, that gap is continuing to grow.
Do they have commercial tags there? I mean, we're comparing, so they don't, so we're comparing our 40 to their 70, but really, we have a mix of 40 and 125 that we're comparing to their 70?
You're correct mathematically,
Right.
but it's probably not more than $1 or $2.
Okay.
Okay, because of the volume of season tags that we sell and the volume of commercial tags. Okay? And when I say that, no, I think only Cape May Point, I'm aware of, has a commercial tag. I'd have to go through all 40 towns and go to their websites, but I've been to a dozen at least, and I haven't seen any. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that having gone to the beaches in Monmouth and Ocean County growing up and into adulthood, you go for the weekend. That's what you do. You drive down to the shore for the weekend, and you know, Cape May is different. Cape May, people come for longer durations. So we see a significantly higher revenue amount from seasonal tags than you do in some of the Monmouth and Ocean beaches.
Do you think the beaches up there are nicer than ours?
No.
They're smaller, right?
Well, every beach is different, but
Well, no, I
I think our beaches are far superior to those in Cape May County. I mean, I think our sand is much, much nicer than other beaches.
it's not as nice as it used to be, really.
well.
But up there, I remember that they had some real problems with erosion, and it's a continuous problem up there.
Yep.
You know, pumping in sand and stuff.
The article actually said Cape May beaches, or I'm sorry, actually said New Jersey beaches now cost $200. And I dove into that a little bit. One town, Deal, raised their price from $150 to $200, and that was now the price the New Jersey beaches charge. Deal has a very long history with respect to beach tags. They were sued by a neighboring town in the 70s because they were discounting the beach tags to residents and charging non-residents significantly more. And that has led to an actual ban in the state of New Jersey. You cannot charge residents less than non-residents. The Cape May County average is $39.17. The median is 40. We're at 40, so we are pretty much right in line with the county. Sea is slightly lower. Ocean City is lower. We saw the revenue number that they're generating from that, so they're doing okay.
Well, when you say the average, you don't count Wildwood that charges nothing, right? You're only counting the beaches
So of the 40 that charge.
that
that's
charge, not the ones that don't charge.
Right, right. And I don't know if you've seen my usual response when people says Wildwood Back beaches are free is, well, they're not free. They're just being paid for by all the taxpayers, as opposed to we have a use charge.
I was just looking at the calculation, that's all.
Yeah, and I would, not that now's the time to explain that, but maybe before you go on to the next section, does anybody really understand Wildwood and how much they really are, you know, that's got to be extremely expensive for the taxpayers there. Are their taxes that much higher in Wildwood than in Cape May?
It's a great question, Mike. Okay, I haven't looked at Wildwood's practices, and maybe at some point I will take a trip up there and talk with them about it. I do see it as being a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to understand their,
But they also charge a local sales tax.
okay,
So they're hitting the tourists up
Yes.
for every single thing they buy.
Yeah.
And that may be that may go to their beach.
And there's a
utility.
lot more stuff on the boardwalk in
Yep.
Wildwood.
Yeah.
Yep.
but they have to sacrifice mercantile fees in exchange for doing something like that. I thought they have, you know, there's a trade-off for.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just, I'm interested in what their finances really look like, that they decided that this makes sense, because their beaches have to be jammed with people.
Well, I guess that the people that would not want to charge for the beaches are the people that own businesses on the.
business.
Sure, the
Or-
business,
Yeah, they
yeah.
want to draw the
Because they don't, you can, you want to go to those businesses, you may not even necessarily use the beach.
And so are the businesses paying more than any place else? I'm sure we know that, but,
I don't personally.
okay.
On page 6, I looked at, I spent a little bit of time looking at what do towns do with respect to giving discounts on their seasonal tags. 65% of New Jersey towns offer some type of a discount, and the cutoff dates range from as early as 12/31 to Memorial Day and to May 31st, like ours is. I'm sorry, ours is April. The average discount is $10, which is 22%. Ours is also $10, which is 25, because ours are lower. So our preseason discount is in line with state practice.
Martin?
Sure.
Have we, maybe just a historical question here, but we, to my knowledge, we only kind of issue a seasonal tag, one version of a seasonal tag, and lots of people collect them. And when I think about license plates and other things, people pay extra for custom or, having
What
some
do we do with
phrase
the
on
extra?
it.
Do we auction them off or what?
Oh, I don't.
Well, no, I'm just wondering if we were to say, hey, the normal seasonal tag is whatever it is, $40, but you can have one that says I'm a ocean rescuer, person, and
We had
that's
s-
$50
we-
or
we had
whatever.
some
Some voluntary, again, thing that we would charge more for that would perhaps people would be willing to collect and be happy to pay for.
Yeah, we had a resident come forward last year to our committee and make
Okay.
a suggestion that we should sell holiday tags. Okay, different design.
Yep.
Where you would be charging more or maybe not discounting it as much, okay? It's an idea. I think that it's an idea that we are keeping in the back of our minds because there's an administrative charge
Sure.
for doing that. right?
Sure,
And,
yep.
and it may not necessarily be something that, it's almost a nice to have as opposed to a revenue generator, but it's definitely out there.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to do it if it's
Right.
not a
What
revenue.
do
but
we
it-
do
but-
with the extra tags they don't sell?
I would assume they destroy them. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, they're worth something in a couple of years if people collect
Yeah,
them,
yeah. Generally speaking, they're, pretty
I'll be
easy.
glad to destroy them for them.
Bob Elwell's eBay account.
One thing, one interesting thing that I did notice was that 75%, 73% of towns offer seniors a discount. And Russ, we've talked about this before, okay? And this is despite the fact that you can't charge residents less. So when a town offers a free beach tag, and some towns do, I could go up to that town as a senior during the period of time that it's available and get a free beach tag. Okay? So it's interesting. Generally speaking, they do require that the purchase be made in person, and you have to show an ID. But what's also interesting is that none of the towns in Cape May County do this. Yet it's predominant practice in the rest of the state, including in Atlantic County.
And we have a lot of seniors, too.
And the discount,
That's the problem, maybe.
and the discount is 70%.
Counterintuitive to the role of the committee.
Right.
I just sent in my yearly thing for the, what is it, the New Jersey Easy Pass.
Yep.
For the senior discount.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize there was one. Thank you. I just
No,
saved some
either. I'm
money.
gonna see my wife about that.
I think it's 10%, guys.
Oh,
Go for it. I think so. You better sign up if you haven't.
We can talk about it again in a couple of minutes and with respect to the recommendations made out of here. I have my own thoughts on it, and I'm interested to hear those of the other members. In Monmouth County, it's 80%. In Ocean County, it's 87% offer a senior discount. When we last had the discussion on this, we did have an idea that, given the fact that the city cannot give beach tag discounts to residents, aren't there people here in Cape May that can't afford beach tags? And I kind of ran with that. And I don't know, I started a program this year with Cape May Cares. thank you, to provide, we provided 25 kids with free beach tags for having done extra work for school or for the community. Great. And
Well, how old do they have to be before they need it?
so they need 12, okay? But what we did with the program, Bob, was that we said you can earn one for yourself and one for your parent, your mom, okay? And there were 11 and under that participated in the program that earned one for their parent.
And he got some nice news coverage on that, too.
They were, the kids were thrilled.
Yeah.
And to our knowledge, we're the only town in New Jersey that does this. We will be continuing it. But I think it's something to be proud of, that we found a way around the fact that the city can't do it, but a private donor can.
My wife tutors at Cape May Fairs.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And that idea came from Mtrac, and I did try to give credit for it. I don't think it made the broadcast, but I did mention it. Okay, daily and weekly tags. The average is $11.50. The Cape May County average is slightly lower at $9.33. There are 2 towns that only sell seasonal tags, so that becomes, in essence, their daily tag. Whether you're getting a tag for a day or for the season is $20. 7 towns offer, all in Monmouth and Ocean counties, offer a discounted fee for weekdays versus weekends. There's at least 1 town that has free beach access on Wednesdays. And in the article that I read, the reason they do it is to give the beach taggers the day off. So interesting.
Well, so that's interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, if we compare the cost
Yep,
of, I don't know what our cost is for
Yep.
beach tags, for beach taggers for a day.
yep.
That's an interesting.
We make plenty of money to pay them, don't worry.
Well, I think that
Do we every day, though? That's the question.
Bob raises a great point, okay? So a lot of these ideas, a lot of these things would be great ideas if we were in a situation where we were scraping. And right now,
But shouldn't we always be?
yes, and that's why we want to continue to talk about it,
Yeah.
okay? Right now, because of the fact we're in a surplus situation, I think that adding to the surplus even more, I'm not sure that, I don't know whether there's caps on that or not, but right now, these are great ideas that we'll keep in our pocket. 21 towns offer weekly tags. Only 50% of towns in New Jersey offer a weekly tag. That I mentioned earlier, when you're in Monmouth and Ocean County, you go for the weekend. You don't go for a week.
Well, didn't we have a weekend tag at one time, or
We do
3-day
still. We
tag?
have a 3,
We
so
still
that's
do,
the next point, okay? But we're the only town in New Jersey that offers a 3-day tag. Nobody else does that.
We thought about getting rid of that.
And it's getting rid of itself, because the purchases were down 19% last year. Okay, so again, we'll talk about that when we come to the next page, which is the recommendations. We talked about this a little bit last year, and I know that Russ's voice, which was very much heard, was that a great many of our seniors don't need a discount on their beach tags. As I've gone through the program with the kids, I'm talking about with Cape May Cares, there's a lot of seniors that live in the Housing Authority as well. And a very low percentage of those seniors apparently participate in their recreation programs. So I'm wondering if we might have the possibility of doing something, again, through Cape May Cares, with giving the seniors the opportunity somehow to be able to earn a tag and hopefully get out of the house a little bit more.
You mean to that specific
So
operation? Yeah,
yes.
that would make a lot more sense.
Right.
Sort of like what you're doing on the kids.
Right,
Makes sense, but how can you give it to those seniors and not the other seniors?
right. So that's,
Well, Victorian Towers would be another area that.
so I don't think that we should, say that we shouldn't look at since it is a predominant practice in New Jersey, but it's not a practice in Cape May County, I don't know that we shouldn't be looking at offering our seniors a discount. Many of our seniors are on fixed incomes, many of them are not.
I'm not against it. I think
Yep.
if you do it broadly, do it to
So when I buy,
the beach anyhow.
when I buy 4 seniors, am I allowed to buy 4 senior
So
tags?
generally, there's a limit, and you have to bring in the ID,
Yeah.
okay? So generally, it's no more than 2.
Yeah.
Okay? And the way that we would, I would think we'd go about this with, I'm interested to hear the committee's responses, it would be for a limited period of time. So it would be the month of January, maybe into February, where you'd have to drive down. If you're not from Cape May, you'd have to drive down, and you'd have to come into town specifically to buy beach tags. And I don't know that the discount needs to be significant. I think it's almost recognition of the fact that, that many of our seniors don't use a lot of the town services, city services. They don't use school services, and yet they're still paying the same tax bill. So any thoughts?
Well, I guess it feels like we're comparing so what we've said is the South Jersey tags are much less expensive than the North Jersey ones. I'm dramatically oversimplifying it. But we're thinking about putting in a senior discount because the North Jersey towns have a senior discount. And it feels like those things are not necessarily aligned to each other. So perhaps you could argue that we should dramatically increase our prices for the masses and not increase them as much for the seniors, but it seems counterintuitive to, as a committee driving taxation revenue, to really push for discounts seems counterintuitive to me, but
Right. So
not trying to be against seniors.
the average discount in the rest of the state is $45. So that's already recognizing the fact that their tags are more expensive. So if they're charging $100,
Yes?
they're charging seniors $50. All right? So we wouldn't necessarily have to discount it by $45. We could discount it by $5 or $10. And so it would be a proportional discount. I don't think we're talking about a lot of money. I think
No,
it's
I
a recognition that giving our seniors a little bit of a.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't, argue against it. I would only make a couple of points, which are, I doubt there are many seniors in this town that need a discount.
That's the point I made. I agree with the last time we had this discussion, as Martin knows.
So that's one point. And my question is how many senior tags do the towns sell that offer them?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I would think it's not a lot, but again, in this town, I don't think you need it. But I mean, what you do through Cape May Cares, if things like that could be
I love what you
done
did through Cape May
on a
Cares.
bigger scale, it'd be great.
Why not?
Yeah, so, okay, let me pursue that then instead this year. Okay, let me see,
Martin, the other one that I recommend that maybe reaching out to is the food closet. It's another network that might be able to,
Sure.
expand
Yes.
I
upon.
actually tried, they didn't respond to my calls.
Okay, well, maybe I
That's
can help.
surprising. They certainly respond to contributions.
Well, may-
I think that I will look to see if we can do something beyond the Housing Authority for the seniors.
Yeah.
Okay, through the private program.
Yeah.
And
see
you
what-
may, as I mentioned to you
You-
before, Martin, there
you've
may be
also-
some seniors that are willing to contribute to the cause.
Right. So, and the other thing is you've tested this theory. So maybe they weren't quite sure how it was going to look and work, but you've proven somewhat of a success model with Cape May Cares.
Sure.
And maybe that is enough to get them interested.
Yeah,
And,
Okay.
And yet, to your point, Russ, why not buy a senior tag for the pool to be distributed, through whatever means
Sure.
you.
I will challenge the premise that there aren't many seniors where a $10 discount would be meaningful.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
do think that there are more people that are on a fixed income than we're probably giving.
And the area is bigger than just the
It
city of
is,
Cape May, so.
no, that's
and
fair.
I
I mean,
and I get that. yeah.
But then, I don't know. I just think there ought to be another way for them to get it.
It's.
Then just give it across the
Having
board.
gone through this,
Yes.
okay, how do you prove financial need?
Yeah, and that's why, but exactly. But, I don't want you to give it to me, is what I'm
The Housing
saying.
Authority does it for us, right? We know that everybody that's in the Housing Authority has need.
Okay.
And so does
Victoria Towers, right.
and the
And
community.
so does the food closet.
Community food closets. I think that's an excellent second.
I mean, I would definitely go there before I gave it across the
You don't
board.
wanna do that.
In part because I think, we are already lower than
Yep.
if they were senior, somewhere else.
Okay, I'll pocket this for now, and I'll try to pursue it on the private solution.
But in the meantime, we ought to, I just sent to you and a couple others, every senior ought to get the New Jersey Easy Pass discount.
Yes.
Because it's 10%, it's not only a 10% discount, guys, it's a 50% discount using Easy Pass on the bridges.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
I think each
That's a
trip,
big deal.
each weekly trip cost me $45.
No, I didn't know about it.
I just assumed that it was, you had it, I'll send it.
One of the
And then-
One of the ideas that Cape May Cares has come back with for next year is having the kids help the seniors in getting groceries and doing some things as the earning opportunity for next year. So it's much, much larger than, even as a resident of Cape May since 2018, I had no idea how large the Housing Authority really is. And there are plans for expansion. There's 65 kids that live in the Housing Authority. I would like to suggest we continue to look at the 3-day tags. If we continue to see a decline, that we try to phase it out. I do remember when the city tried to end it, there was an outcry.
What was the basis of the outcry?
It's change.
Yes, and no one likes change, but was there any logic behind?
So I will tell you, being on the B&B side of this, there were a lot of tourists who were coming in for the weekends, and a lot of the hotels and motels, the B&Bs, got a lot of pushback from people who were coming and saying, why was this being done? So it really was because people do come here for the
Sure.
weekend, and that was one of the reasons.
We're not the only town that has B&Bs.
Yeah, and I guess I would have challenged
nobody
them
else
on the
has that
commercial
product.
tags then. They should be buying commercial tags.
Charges is,
No, it's not for them. They don't buy the tags. Their guests were saying, why can't we get a 3-day tag?
right, but.
That would be my
Fine,
answer.
right, yeah.
I'm
They
I'm
should
not
be
sounding very
providing
sympathetic, I'm sure, but I would, yeah,
And it does cost us revenue.
yeah.
Right, because if you're getting 2 daily tags, it's $20, and if you're getting a weekly tag, it's $25. So the $15 does cost the city revenue.
They should do away with it. Well, it's not only that, it's, to the beach taggers out on the beach, it's a pain in the neck,
Is it?
because now they got the daily, all the different tags.
That was where the biggest complaint came
I can
from.
believe it.
The council, they came in and said, please get rid of that 3-day
Well,
tag.
we're obviously not going to do it this year, so we will look at this year's sales. If we see that the market is actually self-selecting away from it, then it makes it a lot easier to justify, and we'll just price them out of it.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that there are discounted daily fees in certain municipalities. I don't think that's a strategy that would work for us. Again, we have a different visitation pattern, and I sincerely doubt anybody's going to come to Cape May that wasn't before because we offered a discounted tag.
Yeah, right, I don't think so.
Maureen mentioned quickly, and it's 2:15, so. Maureen mentioned quickly the beach concession agreements. So this is another area that, look, you can say what you like about the different city Facebook groups. I follow them, I participate in them. I find it helpful in terms of gathering public sentiment, good, bad, or indifferent, okay? I try to contribute facts. I try to help people to understand the truth, provide information. I even Googled myself, and AI told me that I like to give people information.
That is really scary.
That is scary.
Yeah,
Did it rate your information? Because that would
I think it actually said accurate information.
Oh, that's
Yep.
You are considered a top, whatever the top
Influencer?
line on Facebook,
Oh,
whatever
I'm
that
a,
is.
yeah.
You are.
All-star,
Right on
yes.
the, all-star.
Yep.
Yeah, you are.
As a part of that, one of the things that surprises me is that, so when we went through the issue with the Jetty, okay, the Jetty Motel, when the consultant that they brought in, and we didn't find out until this last meeting, for those of you that haven't watched the 2 meetings, yes, it's 8 hours, but it's worthwhile to get a picture of what's going on in our city. They brought in somebody that used to own a hotel management company, and that was taken over by a larger company, and he was presenting himself as being an expert. We didn't actually find out until late in the meeting, during the rebuttal session on Tuesday, that he is not a part of anything, that he's just there because he has interest in the hotel and motel industry, okay? And he was the one that said that there was a all-inclusive resort on Block Island, which there's not, and that there are all-inclusive resorts that the major hotel chains are starting outside the U.S. One of the things he also said was that it's like a Sandals, and that was what the Save the Cove group picked up on right away. The Sandals Resort, okay? And therefore, there was going to be a private beach, and it was going to ruin the Cove Beach because now this huge building, which is only 56 guest rooms, about 18 more than currently, they're going to have their private beach. No one in Cape May can have a private beach, okay? You need to have a concession agreement with the city to be able to use a beach. And those concession agreements, as Maureen mentioned, are very detailed. Going back to code enforcement, those provisions are not necessarily being lived up to. And a lot of people think that the hotels own the beaches that they are using. So there's a bit of a public education element to this. But the agreements, which are 5-year agreements, are expiring this year. So Maureen was talking about the fact that they're gearing up to negotiate these agreements. We've already said in the past that we've pointed out that there were hotels that were using the beach that didn't have agreements, and Maureen got them to have agreements last year. I think the same thing is true this year. I've seen a couple of hotels that weren't on the list. I've seen carts crossing Beach Avenue when I'm running.
So the new operations manager has been made aware that, and that's part of her routine now, to go out there and check.
We also have more beach boxes than we do beach bog licenses. So there are additional locations for beach boxes than are being paid for. When we get ready for 2026, one of the things that we found when we reviewed this back in July of last year was that we have no idea where the numbers came from that result in the fees that are being paid. And so Mtrac did recommend, and Maureen did already bring this recommendation back, we should be getting our costs covered. And it can be as simple as knowing how much do we pay to maintain and guard the beaches, how many linear feet are there of beaches, and dividing one by the other, now you know how much it costs per linear foot. And that should be the basis for the tags. For the concession, sorry. I run up and down Beach Ave multiple times a week, and that gives me plenty of time to think. And maybe we'd have to differentiate the east end from the west end, because it probably costs us less to maintain the beaches on the east end. The guards are less frequent, and they don't get as dirty. But, so we're interested in making sure that becomes a part of the 2026. And then we also said that all beaches should be offered for sale. And the last time that we did this, that wasn't true.
And is this by auction, or is there a schedule of fees that is set?
So the beach concessions go out to bid, and they will go out to bid in the fall. I did provide an update to both the city manager and Mr. Gillenschwartz the last time this came up at one of our meetings with regard to the committee's concerns that were raised about enforcement, making sure that there is an understanding of, allowing the public into these spaces, that they are not exclusive. 3, to check on anything that appeared to be activity that was not under a beach concession on the beach. And finally, number 4, that this committee had asked for the next time these concessions came up, that there be a broader assessment as to whether or not we wanted to, those should be expanded. So that is all in the city manager and Mr. Gillenschwartz list that I provided an update to from a prior discussion. So now we have an operations manager who is overseeing this. So she's tasked with making sure that we've got compliance. As I said, she met with them all in April, reviewed the parameters, what is permitted. The final thing is with regard to what would be offered at bid, it really probably would be a discussion with council as to how far they want to offer, concessions.
So Maureen, is part of the allowing the non-exclusive, are there rules relative to how many, prime spots you can
Yeah,
take with your
it's very
umbrellas and stuff?
specific to each agreement, Russ, because I've looked at them, so
Okay.
it is very specific to
'Cause
what
it
they're
just seems
permitted.
at some beaches, like, all the spots are taken.
Yeah, so
already.
they, it's very specific to how much when they can set up, how much they can set up, et cetera. So now that we've got somebody who's really sort of tasked with being, who has ownership of this process on more than just code enforcement's, list of things to do. The other piece of it is just to mention, and this is the yin and the yang, opening it up so that every beach is available does have, public kind of pushback in the past, because people then feel that, wait a minute, it's already taken 10% or 20% of the beaches. Now I can't find a beach I can sit at that doesn't have one of these concessions. So I'm not quite sure how that decision will be made. It might be made simply as sort of like, look, we're only going to allow it once, I'm making this up, once every 5 blocks or once every 4 blocks or whatever it might be. And to the point, Marty, for the work that this group, I think looking at making some recommendations on price points, would probably be value added. Because I'm not, as you said, the prior agreements, as many of these things that we've looked at really didn't come with any knowledge of how those prices were derived. So maybe something that has a metric associated with it would be a good starting point.
So there's no private beaches?
There are no private beaches.
How about the beach club?
Well, that's
That's
privately owned.
It's city property. What are you talking about?
But they have,
Well, I don't know, I'm just asking
I don't,
you. You're
I
saying
don't know
there's
the
no
answer to
private
that.
Well, actually,
I don't know if I can walk up there and go onto their beach. I don't know the answer.
You
to that.
can't.
Well, I think that, again, there are properties that own the beach.
I think there's riparian
But
rights.
only,
People own the beach.
they only own the beach to the high tide
Exactly.
Right.
mark, and that's it. Everything else is public, and I'm going to have to say that the beach club would be in the same position.
I was going to say, some of those people used to have riparian rights.
Well,
I don't know what's changed. since I've
obviously,
been
and this was something that I also did put in the email to Mr. Dietrich and Mr. Gillen-Schwartz. I believe that there's one hotel that does own their beach. I'm not going to say it out loud because I'm not clear on that. We do know that there's a parcel of land for sale on the beach right now. So you are right, Bob. Obviously, you're right. You've been here longer than I have. So what I asked them to do was just to clarify that if there are rights owned for certain sections of the beach, that wouldn't be known to anyone outside of maybe the
I hope the
legalese.
city buys that parcel myself.
So even though somebody owns that, it's not their beach.
No.
They can't restrict use. Okay? So the city still gets the beach tag revenue from that beach, even though the city doesn't own it. It has a very strong easement agreement associated with it.
Well, it used to be also the city had to supply the lifeguards for those beaches.
They do.
I mean, I don't know
Yep.
what's changed, but
I don't
it's
know
very
the
interesting
answer to the
me.
beach
You know,
club,
hear
but
this.
I do know that on a statewide basis, you cannot restrict access to the beaches.
Down where the water.
You can
ebbs and
charge
flows.
You
for
can't
access.
restrict access to the water,
Sorry?
access to the water.
So that actually is something that's in front of the legislation now, that you'll be able to walk down to the water and not have to pay when you enter the beach. And the problem there is, how do you enforce that?
You're supposed, it's my understanding that in Cape May, if you say I'm just going surfing, the tagger is supposed to let you on to go surfing.
So this is growing out of that situation last year where the surfer was alleged that he was assaulted by the police. And he was a surfer and he didn't have a tag. I'll just leave it at that. So there is legislation, but I don't believe that that's true yet. That the problem is that how do you enforce, I'm only going down to the water and I'm going to stay down below the high tide level, all right?
Well,
So
the taggers used to stroll the beach and check you there. They don't do that anymore, though. They just do it at the entrance.
An observation I've had as well, yep. So going back to the beach concession agreements,
Everything's changed.
it makes sense that there be a strategy, and it's great that, so you've introduced me to this person, Michelle Sampson, so I'll reach out to her and have a conversation with her at one point, just to understand a little bit better. It would make sense to not offer every beach for sale in order to support public sentiment. But I will tell you that on the west end of town, when I walk from beach to beach, there's virtually no beaches at all where there's not something being sold. Okay? And not all of them have agreements today. So we'll continue to take a look at this, and, I mentioned doing an informal review. I just went beach to beach last year, and I counted how many beach mats there are, and they're each 4 feet, so now I knew how many feet there were, okay? And where there were agreements, and then looked at where there were concessions and looked at where there were agreements. It was pretty disparate. So there also are situations where too many umbrellas are being put out too early. And again, this is what this ops manager that's her job. So that's great to hear that we're taking that seriously. What most of the public don't know is you can sit right in the middle of that area with your umbrella and your towel if you want to, and they can't do anything to restrict you from using that, okay? Also, you can rent their chair and umbrella at any one of those for a fee. So if you want to go to one of the hotels and use their beach and pay a fee, you're allowed to by agreement. Now, nobody thinks about that, and I think that people would feel uncomfortable doing that, but at the same time, it is a part of the agreements.
Well, presumably, we could require those businesses that are successfully negotiating an agreement to put up a sign that says exactly what you just said.
So they are there. Maybe
sign
not
are
on
there?
every one of them, but
Okay.
yep, I do, yep, I have seen them. So, all right, so coming out of this discussion, we're going to continue, I'm on page 12. I'm going to continue to look at the data, the sales tag data, tag sales data, and share it with the group, share what conclusions we might think about. I'll table the addition of a discount, and then we'll take a look at the 3-day tags and continue to have conversations about the beach concession agreement.
But instead of the discount for seniors,
We're going to table that.
but instead of that, what I'm suggesting is more along the lines of what you've done.
Yes.
I think that definitely should be something we should.
Well, I've already mentioned it to Cape May Cares, and we're working on it. Again,
And I
the
think
difficulty is being able to know where the need exists outside the housing.
Outside the,
Cape May, the food closet, I do know, and I will talk to someone who is on their board. They very much know sort of the families in need, and they know the financial levels because it's part of their mission to understand. So, they may be willing to at least engage in a conversation and sort of do a little bit of a trial run with you for getting that group, because there are families with young children, they sort of do know their clientele.
Okay. We have no public comment today. I'll continue to put that as a part of the agenda, and my error in not posting the agenda, I'll make sure that happens the next time. Any other thoughts before we adjourn?
Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I appreciate the opportunity to join you all. I'd love to, kind of going forward, have us think about, is there a specific target that we're trying to reach with identifying, again, cost reductions, sources of revenue, whatever, so that then we can say, yep, here's our target, and here's some number of things that we're going to do to get to that target. I'd love for us to establish that in the future.
Did I share how much I hate 1 p.m.
Martin, could I
meetings?
ask one thing?
Sorry?
Did I share how much I hate the 1 p.m. meeting?
There's only one more, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Martin, I think what you did today was good, but maybe we should ask the council, is there one thing they want us to focus on? Yeah,
Yep.
why not?
So Maureen, would you ask the council if maybe there's one thing that they want us to focus on? I will. I do know that the budget caps is an area of concern.
That's good.
Yeah, so that was brought to my attention.
That's good.
There may be others. All right, thank you for your input and attention. I appreciate it.
thank you, Martin.